What it is, what it do, cyber world. It is your girl, the one and only Ash Brown, and this is the Ash Said It Show. Over 2,000 episodes since 2014, 500,000 streams all around the world, and shout out to my buddies over there in Singapore. You guys have been downloading the show. I appreciate all of that love, all of that support. Today, I have a very esteemed author with me today, the wonderful Cathy. Wonderful. And her book is, of course, Love the Foods That Love the Planet. Hey, Cathy.
Hey, hi, Ash. How you doing?
I am great. How are you today?
I'm wonderful. Thanks for asking. Yep, everything is good here.
Awesome. All right, Cathy. So what was the inspiration behind this book?
Well, it's all about the impact of the climate crisis on all of us, but I'm a sustainable chef, so this, it's seen through the lens of food, what we eat, how we grow it, how we source it, how we cook it, and how we can repurpose it so we don't waste it. And, in the book, I talk about the challenges to the food system, how farmers and scientists are doing their best to respond. But also, I really focus on the home cook and what we all can do to minimize our household's climate impact. And it turns out there's quite a bit we can do to make a difference. And it all starts with our forks. So this is a cookbook, after all. It illustrates how we can eat for the planet. It's got over 100 eco-friendly, super healthy recipes. And, folks should know that it's global in scope. So it's inspired by home cooking traditions from all over the world.
Wow, that is incredible. Over 100 eco-friendly recipes. I don't know, Cathy, if I've even had a cookbook with eco-friendly recipes. Now, you got me questioning a lot of things.
Yeah, might be the first of its kind. It's got information. It's got little insights on every recipe about how the food is grown in a country or what the climate challenges are or different foods and the growing practices, all sorts of things. And there's climate footprint information for key ingredients in every single recipe. So, as far as I know, no one's done this before. But I think it's really useful because people can begin to become aware of what foods are good for the planet and which foods are not so great for the planet, in terms of climate change, and what's driving our problems with greenhouse gas emissions. So it's a guidebook that way.
Yes, definitely. Okay, so as a seasoned chef, what did you discover on this journey to creating this cookbook, very, first of its kind? What was something that maybe surprised you or things that you actually learned yourself?
Yeah. Well, I started this a couple of years ago, diving, just really trying to educate myself about climate change because I was growing so worried about it, and for everybody worldwide, because the effects are, there is no place that's not affected. And I learned, there were some big surprises. So what I learned was that the food sector, which, is just beginning to be discussed now in policy circles, but not that much yet, but it accounts for a third of greenhouse gas emissions. That's like right after energy comes food, and yet, it's getting no love, no attention, and, we really haven't changed very much in terms of how our food is produced, but it's a big part of the climate puzzle. I learned that food waste, accounts for, of all the food that we produce worldwide, a third of it ends up, wasted or lost along the supply chain. So that was astonishing to me as well. That was much bigger than I expected. I learned, I had expected going into this, I thought eating locally was like the be-all and the end-all. It was the most environmentally friendly thing I could do. But so this surprised me. I learned that, it hardly made a blip when it came to greenhouse gas emissions. It's a factor, but it's a minor one. What really are the drivers behind the food sector's climate impact has to do with how much land is used, how it's used, and agricultural practices, how much energy is required for pesticides and herbicides and fertilizers and machinery and all the rest of it. And again, the food loss and waste, that was the other huge impact. Those three things really drive food emissions. So all of that. And the last thing I just want to add, because I also learned in as I was researching this, as taking it all the way down to the household, to what, our day-to-day lives, that the most impactful thing that we could do, each and every one of us, hinged on what we put in our mouth, the types of food we eat. That could make an enormous difference with slashing our own individual climate impact that we could make. So that was telling.
Wow, that is very telling. Like I had no idea, because honestly and truthfully, I thought the same way. Like, supporting local restaurants, supporting, those type of small businesses. Like, wow. I am at a loss.
Yeah, I mean, it's great to support our local farmers and so forth, and all, I agree with you, but, and we should, I don't want to discourage anybody from doing that. That's a wonderful thing to do, but it's not the key drivers with emissions. So I thought the two also went hand in hand, and it turned out it didn't.
Wow, that is fascinating. Like, I think that's one of the main things I'm taking from this conversation. I'm like, wow, really? Like, it is still good. Like, and I'm going to continue to support small business and supporting those restaurants. But wow, that is definitely brand new information. Did not think about that.
Yeah, and I guess I'd say one more thing about, making a connection for people about what we eat, what makes food, certain dishes climate friendly, and which, what doesn't. And so when I talk about what, it depends what we put on the end of our forks, what it comes down to is that the largest food emitters of types of foods that we eat starts with livestock, I'm afraid to say. So, starting with the large ruminant animals, the beef cattle, the lamb and mutton, dairy cows, and on down, those emit an enormous amount of greenhouse gases because of the land they require and the amount of land they require, not only for grazing but also for feeding them, and also for their, in the case of beef, they emit a lot of methane, which is a really polluting greenhouse gas, 80 times stronger than carbon dioxide, and beef, just they chew their cud and they emit a lot of methane. So, those are big drivers, but it's not just animals. There are some other wonderful foods that we are, many of us are very fond of, like chocolate and coffee and, cooking oils we tend to use quite a bit of. All of these things are problematic also, and how we source those foods become all important in order to really lower emissions. So the book is chock full of this sort of information, so people begin to understand what kinds of recipes should they begin to play with to help the climate and to alleviate some of the pressure on it. And the foods that are the lowest emitting are those in the plant kingdom and the mushroom kingdom. So those, with a couple of exceptions, but pretty much by and large, the whole grains and all the wonderful legumes, lentils and beans, fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds, those are really kind to the planet, but by comparison.
Yes. Now, with over 100 eco-friendly recipes, how were you and your team able to decipher, you know, because I'm sure that you came up with a lot more than 100. There probably were tons more of things to come up with.
Yeah. Well, in my own repertoire, because I've been chef for, over 10 years or more at this point. So we started, I wanted to curate the healthiest of the healthy as well as the greenest of the green, so this, I figured, let's create a model for people so that they're eating for the planet, but they're also eating for themselves.
Right.
So it's not a sacrifice, it's a joy. The recipes are all a lot of fun food. It's very diverse. If you like global traditions, there's something in there for everybody, because it spans the world. In terms of how it's organized, I start with seasonings and sauces and, appetizers and small bites, and there are soups and sandwiches and lots of different breads, and then all the main entrees. There are several chapters there, and then of course we end with desserts. So there are 8 recipe chapters that run the gamut. But yeah, I tried to narrow it down. There were a couple of recipes in there, one with chocolate for sure, because to really help people understand how to source it sustainably and ethically for the planet and for the people on the planet. So, some of them were educational. There were lessons embedded in them that I wanted to share for people, so they know where to go.
Right. Now, what suggestion would you give for someone, much like myself, about sourcing spices? What would be the best way?
Yes. Yeah, so spices is but first of all, I would say, spices, I'm all for spices. I think the more spices and herbs and chilies and, we can use, it first of all, it raises your dishes to new heights.
Oh, yeah.
And, they're delicious. But I tend to work with whole spices instead of ground spices, and I grind them myself with a little inexpensive coffee grinder. Number one, you can avoid adulterated spices because you don't really know, and there have been problems with contamination or lesser, products mixed in with spices, and there's no controls. There's no FDA overlooking the spice rack. So, my guidance is to buy whole spices, and for some of them, if you can source them back to the growers, you have the greatest control over the quality of what you're getting as well. So yeah, I would say, just in a nutshell, that would be where I would take spices. What kind of spices do you like to use?
I like a little bit of everything. I like cinnamon. My grandmother was really big, and it's funny that we're talking about spices. My family's from the Caribbean, so there's always a lot of like peppers and cinnamons and things mixed in our food. Yeah. And my grandmother always kept whole nutmeg. She would grate her own nutmeg in like all of everything that she made that was like a sweet. Oh my gosh, nutmeg is the best. And I'm just thinking now, because I have those memories of whole nutmeg, and it's like, you can't go to the store and see that. You've got to go to like a farmer's market now and get something like that.
Well, you can order also almost everything online, so, and in fact, that's how I buy whole nutmeg myself, and it's very easy to just, with a little rasp, to grate it fresh. First of all, when you're using whole spices, they're fresh. They can last a really, really long time when they're unground. Right. Once you grind them, they begin to, the essential oils in them begin to degrade. So, then they have a shelf life that you have to pay attention to when you do. So there are spice blends in the cookbook as well, interesting things from different parts of the world, because, every corner of the planet has, their own unique flavor profiles from indigenous herbs and spices and local ingredients and so forth. But yeah, the Caribbean is phenomenal for its use of spices and chili is it can't be beat. So that's I would concur. With your grandma, buy your whole nutmeg. Grind it or rasp it as you need it, and that's true with everything. The flavors will be so much more lively. If you take the cumin seed out of a jar that's been ground and you buy it, just as a convenience, versus cumin that you freshly, just warm in a pan to roast for a minute or two and then grind, it's just like night and day. You won't believe it. So yeah. It's a great way to bump up the flavor in your cooking.
Yes, and last but certainly not least, Cathy, what's the best way for people to secure their copy of this amazing book?
Well, it's available. Thank you for asking. It's available already on pre-order at everywhere. So on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, anywhere your local bookshop can put their hands on it, or pre-order it, and it becomes available on November 5th. So then it's widely available online, and I love to support our local bookstores as well, and they can all procure a copy for you.
Love that. Cathy, thank you so much for coming through tonight. We appreciate you. And much more success to you.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me. I loved it.
Absolutely. And I appreciate each and every one of you guys. Thank you so much for your love and support. Keeping in mind, anyone to tell you that you can't do what you want to do, you look them square in the face, you tell them, don't believe me. Just watch. Watch what I do. Watch me make it happen. Watch me make history. That's what we're doing this for, the history books. Social media is nice, but real life is so much better. Until next time, you guys.